Malcolm Turnbull won't say whether he raised the U.S. refugee resettlement deal during a half-hour rendezvous with President Donald Trump in Manila overnight. The Prime Minister, who is in the Philippines' capital for the East Asia Summit, had one-on-one time with Mr. Trump in his presidential suite. There were no officials in the room during the meeting, which went for more than 30 minutes. We decided we would sit down and have a very frank discussion, as we do. We have a very good relationship, very frank relationship, as you can see, Mr. Turnbull told reporters in Manila on Tuesday. Terrorism, the fight against Islamic State militants in the Middle East and closer to home dominated the conversation. Mr. Turnbull would not be drawn on whether he raised the prospects of speeding up the U.S. refugee resettlement deal. A standoff at the mothballed Manus Island detention center continues, with hundreds of barricaded refugees and asylum seekers refusing to leave. The refugee deal was a major flashpoint between the two leaders during their notoriously heated phone call in January. Mr. Trump reluctantly agreed to honor the deal, struck by the previous Obama administration, to resettle up to 1,250 refugees. Only 54 have gone to America so far. The U.S. resettlement program is progressing, so that is all happening, Mr. Turnbull said. Mr. Turnbull recently rejected a New Zealand offer to accept 150 people to focus on the U.S. deal. He urged the refugees to comply with Papua New Guinea's laws by leaving the naval base compound and move to alternative accommodation. Mr. Turnbull also had talks with the U.S. National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster. Mr. Turnbull on Tuesday had a bilateral meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during which the pair talked about reviving a four-nation security forum. The forum is widely viewed as a way to counter growing Chinese influence, and diplomats from Australia, the US, India and Japan met on Sunday. Former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd pulled out of the arrangement in 2008 because he was worried about upsetting Beijing. The reality is, we have lots of security on our agenda. The world is a pretty small place nowadays and you have to work closely together, Mr. Turnbull said, while playing down criticism from Beijing. A spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the government had taken note of the development. We hope that the policies and actions of relevant parties would correspond with the trend of the times that calls for peace, development, friendship and cooperation, and serve to maintain and promote regional peace, stability and prosperity, he said. Mr. Turnbull was also due to meet Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on the sidelines of the summit. Later on Tuesday, Mr. Turnbull will also get together with leaders from the 15 other countries negotiating a China Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Free Trade Pact for a first-time meeting. Meanwhile, Mr. Turnbull kept the door open on ramping up Australian assistance to the Philippines' fight against Islamic extremism. He witnessed Australian-trained Filipino soldiers, fresh from fighter and Islamic State insurgency at Marawi in the country's south, being put through their paces in an urban warfare drill on Monday afternoon. 80 Australian Army personnel are training jungle fighters to handle urban combat, and Australia also provided some surveillance aircraft. The Philippines government characterized Australia's assistance as a game-changer. We don't have plans to add to that commitment at that stage, but, believe me, we recognize that in this region, we need to be prepared to give assistance and, if necessary, more assistance to ensure we keep Islamic State out of the region, Mr. Turnbull said. The Prime Minister is due home on Wednesday morning in time for the announcement on the same marriage postal survey result. He also traveled to Vietnam for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Summit and visited Hong Kong.